I recently got contacted by a small developer who created a new multi-tap delay plugin called Lumina Delay. This plugin can be used with immersive audio in channel formats up to 7.1.4, and that piqued my interest because there aren't really that many delay plugins that can work with multi-channel audio. Now, I have previously reviewed Audio Brewer's Astrometry Delay, which I really like. However, Astrometry Delay processes audio through ambisonics, and that might not be everybody's preferred method. Another option is the Cargo Cult's delay plugin Slapper 3, which is really good, but it comes with a very hefty price tag of $439. So when I discovered that Lumina Delay only costs $79 and promises to work directly on multi-channel audio, I was intrigued. Additionally, it has a recommendation from music producer Ryan Schwabe, and while I usually don't pay much attention to these types of recommendations, I happen to know Ryan personally. We used to teach in the same college before he found success as a music producer, so I do trust his judgment, and that further increased my interest in this plugin. And this is what we're going to do today. In this video, we'll be checking out Lumina Delay from Mountain Road DSP, and that is a multi-tap delay plugin that developer calls the first visual and fully immersive delay. Let's dive in and explore its immersive features. Before I get started, a quick reminder to hit the like and subscribe buttons. We recently reached 25,000 subscribers, and I think we can do even better than that. And a big shout out to our newest awesome Third Order channel member, Mark Montocchio. I hope I pronounced you correctly. Thank you so much for your support. It's truly appreciated. If you want to support this channel like Mark, check out all the options in the description below. I should also point out that Mountain Road DSP has provided me with a free license of the Lumina Delay. However, nobody has seen this video before it goes live, and everything that I'm going to say is strictly my own opinion. And with that being said, let's check out Lumina Delay. So I'm going to work with Cubase today, and what I've done here is I've simply opened up an empty session and added a little drum loop, and that is really everything that we need in order to demonstrate how the Lumina Delay is going to work. So let's just have a brief listen what we have here. So a very simple loop. Now, I'm not really interested that much in the stereo version of Lumina, so what I'm going to focus on here is the immersive version, and I'm going to put that onto a 7.1.4 track. And for that purpose, what I'm going to do is I'm first going to add a group track here, and I'm going to route the loop into that group track. So let me just open up the channel settings here and route that into this group track. Let's just hear if we still hear the audio. Yes, we do. And then essentially what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to add Lumina Delay as an insert. So let me search for Lumina Delay. Here we have it. And in addition to that, I'm also going to add a supervision, where we are, supervision analyzer, so that we can actually see what's happening in the individual channels. So here we have Lumina Delay, and it's actually relatively straightforward the way the interface is set up. You have the individual tabs here. You have control. So one thing that you can do for each tab, you can change the volume individually, but you can also change the volume globally. So this knob here on the left side is a global knob, and then essentially you have for the position different knobs that control the center, that control the LFE, and if I go down here, the panning between left and right, the panning between front and rear, and the panning between bottom and top. And that's actually really nice. So instead of having a three-dimensional view, what you have here is really kind of three panning options, left, right, front, back, top, bottom, and that's actually fairly kind of easy to use and probably very intuitive for anybody who is used to regular traditional panning. And in addition to that, you also have a filter, high and low pass filter for each individual tab, and that then allows you to essentially control each individual tab. So what I'm going to do here is I'm first going to change the subdivision to 1/8, just kind of because I like that better. And then I'm going to simply delete all those tabs. I'm going to start fresh. Now you would have the possibility to use individual presets. The plugin comes with a couple of presets. The problem with those presets though is that these presets have obviously been designed for well, that one was actually kind of, I just added that. It was obviously designed for the stereo version of the delay plugin, and that essentially means that, and we will actually see that a little bit later, that the front, rear, and the bottom top panning is not completely intuitive. So if you're using one of the presets, be aware that they don't really work particularly well for immersive audio. So let me just kind of delete that again, and let's just kind of add a tab here. Oops, I need to set that back to 1.8. That has kind of changed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one here, and let's just see how that sounds and what we have. Now currently I'm at 100% wet. So let me just change the filter. So I can change the volume, obviously. I can add a second one. I can add an LFE signal. No, you're not going to hear that, but I can add that. And once again, kind of I can add that for each individual tab, and I can also kind of change that globally. And then I can pan. Now, one thing that you will see, and let me for a moment just kind of set that wet to 100% wet. Now we have an LFE signal here, so let me just kind of remove the LFE here. You will see that there's no signal in the front, and the reason for that is that by default, the rear front slider is set to center, and center essentially means that there's no signal going to the front speakers, and there's also no signal going to the actual surround speakers in the back. So if you want to have a signal in the front, we actually need to move that to the front. Now the button here is a little unintuitive. Normally I would expect that kind of if I move that to the left, it's front, and if I move that to the right, it's the back, but it's actually the opposite. But that's fine. So if we move that to the right, we get a little bit of a signal here into the front. And the same thing goes for the top and the bottom. So we currently have it in the center. I can put everything into the top. Or the bottom. Here essentially see how that affects the individual channels. Let's leave that kind of here. And let's bring in the dry signal back in. Now I can add a center signal. However, a center signal I can only add if there's actually something in the front. So let me just kind of add a little bit of a center signal here. So I see the center coming back in. So if I have nothing in the front, so let's maybe kind of move that to the back. Then I will also have no signal, and for that I probably need to kind of set that back to 100% wet. Because I have no signal in left-right, I also have no signal in the center. So kind of the center signal only comes in if there's actually signal going to the front, which is fairly obvious. So let me kind of move that back to the front a little. And let's kind of... And that's actually really, really cool. So I really like that plugin. Now there are a couple of things that you can do. Now here you can deselect the individual, or you can bypass certain effects. So you can bypass the global volume, you can bypass the panning, you can bypass the filter section. Unfortunately, in the version that I have right now, that actually does not work. So if I'm deselecting that, it's not going to change anything. I've contacted the developer about that bug, and he's already working on that. So by the time you're watching this video, this should work. But these are essentially bypass buttons for the volume, the panning, and the filter section. And then you can kind of clean everything up. And here you have the individual settings. Now, a couple of things that I wanted to point out, and for that, first let me kind of clean up the, kind of delete everything again, and let's set that to 100%. And that is that it has a couple of quirks, so be aware of that. Currently, the way this works is that essentially left and right channel are sent directly as left and right channel into the 7.1.4 group track, and then essentially the delay takes left and right channel, kind of converts it into mono and kind of positions that around. However, the way that the delay works is that it sort of channels every signal that comes in on the other channels through. And what I mean by that is probably easiest kind of shown. So let me just go into the channel settings of where are we? Here kind of the individual loop. And let me just close that. Don't need that for a moment. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of set a little bit of signal into the LFE, so that from the original kind of loop, there's actually an LFE signal going into the 7.1.4 group track on which the delay sits. Now, technically, that should now be factored into the delay, but what is actually happening is that it is channeled through. So let me just open up the Lumina delay again. And we have set everything to 100%, and there is no tap going on, so we should actually hear nothing at all. But we actually do hear something, and the reason we hear something is because it is channeling the LFE channel through. So be aware that if you're using that plugin, a signal that comes in on any other channel than the left and right channel is just kind of passed through, and which I guess is fine. You just need to be aware of that. Otherwise, you might run into issues that the delay is not working in the way you're expecting it to work. So what I need to do is let's go back into the settings of the original, and let's turn that back to 0. So that's one thing that you need to be aware. The other thing, and I already mentioned that if you go into the Lumina delay and you are loading a preset, so let me just load maybe, whatever. Doesn't really, let's use that one. And if I now kind of play the audio, because the delay tabs auto default to being in the center, there's no signal in the left and right channel. So just be aware of that if you're using one of the presets that come with Lumina delay, you might need to, or you probably will need to change the position of those tabs if you want to actually use them. I'm assuming this is simply because these presets have been created for the stereo version of the delay, and they don't really gracefully scale up to the immersive version of the delay. The final thing that I wanted to point out is that this delay plugin does not work on every digital audio workstation. I could not get it to work with Studio One, for example. So if you want to play around with it, make sure that you try it out first. Depending on what digital audio workstation you're using, you might run into issues. I tried it with a couple of different DAWs. It worked quite well in Pro Tools, Cubase, Nuendo. It worked in pretty much everything. It did not work once again in Studio One. So if you want to use this plugin, if you're interested in this plugin, I highly, highly recommend that you check it out first and make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to work. But other than that, I think this is a really interesting plugin. It is once again relatively inexpensive. It is not as powerful as the Cargo Codes Slapper plugin. That actually has a lot of more things that it can do, but the Slapper plugin is 5 times as expensive as this one. So, kind of you would expect that for 5 times the price, you get 5 times the features. So for the price, I think this is a really nice option. I can recommend that. I like the fact that this is a very small developer. It's a one-person company, and they did something that is really useful, and a lot of people will actually appreciate the fact that this is very intuitive to use and might do the trick for many of the things that you want to do with a delay in a immersive environment. And that's everything I wanted to say today. Thanks again for watching my videos. I truly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, please use the comment section below or join us on our Discord server for a chat. An invite link is in the description as well. With that being said, see you all in the next video.